Hey, this is Chris Berry, the Idaho Painter, owner of Paint Life TV on YouTube. You are listening to the Builder Sessions. Hopefully, you enjoy this show.
Welcome to the Builder Sessions, a podcast where we chat with your favorite builders.
We get to know them, their stories, and hopefully inspire you to get off the couch and build something cool. I'm Hoff.
And I'm Rosie. And on this episode, we have Chris Berry, the Idaho Painter. We covered a lot of ground in this one, including how his athletic experience helped bolster his resilience as a business owner, how looking at pricing mistakes as an education, just like college, can positively impact long-term growth, and how the difference between a journeyman and an apprentice is the journeyman knows how to fix everything.
All this and more on this episode of the Builder Sessions.
Chris, welcome to the Builder Sessions.
Oh my gosh, I'm glad to be here. Glad to be talking with you guys. This is gonna be fun.
It's so. When Hoff told me he booked you, I was like, okay, Chris, that name sounds familiar. And then he's like, Idaho Painter. I was like, oh my gosh, I've been following that guy forever. And I never put the name to the moniker or whatever. And so it's really cool to have you here.
Yeah, I think you originally, asked me to be on your show 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So glad to be here now.
Good things take time though, right? You gotta. Everybody's working. We appreciate the time. People just at the drop of a hat.
Yeah, like we're teachers. We understand. We gotta be But for those of our sorry, go ahead.
I appreciate your service for being teachers, so that's awesome.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
I don't hear that very often.
No. I'm gonna take that as a win.
Yeah. Actually, though. But for those of our listeners who are unfamiliar with you and what you have going on, tell us a little about yourself.
If you haven't, heard of who I am, I got a YouTube channel called Paint Life TV. I started creating content on YouTube probably about 12 years ago, and that came from me being a painting contractor. So I've been a painting contractor for probably about 25 years now in the trade. So I started making YouTube videos probably about 5 years into being a painter, and then that eventually grew and became Paint Life TV, teaching and educating, people in the trade. So by trade, I'm a painter. I, once again, I've been doing that for 25 years, and it kind of like some of my story, how in the world did I get into the trades? My father was, a contractor building custom homes. I kind of grew up working for him. Remember swinging a hammer, when I was 12 years old. I think I was getting paid about 50 cents an hour, back then. And so I think my story is probably a lot like a lot of people's story. Is my father was really pushing me to get educated in college and go to college so I can be something better than he was, and because he felt like he wasn't amounting to much because he was a framer, he was in the trades, and eventually graduated to building custom homes. But I kind of through pressure, just him wanting me to go to college, I ended up going to college. Getting a college degree, and kind of an interesting degree, urban and regional planning, and probably most people listening to this would have no idea what that's even about, and I pretty much didn't either. But so I got a college degree, and I worked at a desk for years. I didn't like what I was doing. I went back to college to get another college degree in computer networking, and I continued working behind a desk. And there's just something wasn't right. Something didn't fit my personality. I didn't like what I was doing. I didn't go to work every day and enjoy it. Didn't love it. And I felt like I was out of place. I was wearing a suit and tie. I didn't feel like it was me, Chris Berry. And I was struggling with it. And, so happens that in 2003, the economy was not doing so well, and the company I was working for wasn't doing so well, and I was offered a severance package to leave the company I was working for. And then I was offered another job to another company, very similar job in computer networking. It was going to be the same thing, and I just knew it wasn't going to be, what I wanted to do. And then I had the opportunity to start a new job in the trades. And a friend of mine that I grew up with, he was just an apprentice in the trades of painting. And I said, "Hey, Darren, let's start a painting company together." And it just so happened to be painting because he was a painter. And at that point in time in my life, I decided I'm going to go into the trades. I'm going to start working for myself. I want to be able to control my own destiny. What I put into it is what I'll get back. And so Darren agreed. We started a painting company called B&K Painting, and that was my introduction into painting. Had no experience, as a professional painter. Jumped right into it with Darren. He didn't have any experience other than a little bit of masking and caulking, and we started B&K Painting. It was crazy.
Wow. How was that jump from
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
the desk to starting your own company? Lots of times there's people that do these career changes into the trades, and they go from, you know, uh, another job and get into something as an apprentice or as a laborer and to see how they like. But you just jumped right in and started your own business. How was that? How was the pressure and stress levels around that decision?
You know, it there is stress, there is pressure. I mean, at that point in time, I had a family. I had 3 kids. I had a wife and 3 kids, and I left a paying job that paid me a salary every day. And but you know, um, it wasn't me. I didn't feel like I can be who I wanted to be. And I'm kind of an interesting individual. If you watch some of my videos, a little bit unique, and I couldn't express myself in ways I wanted to express myself. But I had the confidence, that if I worked hard at whatever I started as a business, if if I was going to start my own business, if I gave good customer service, and I charged a fair price, I felt like I was going to be successful. That doesn't mean it was going to be easy, and I just had that confidence that it would work out, and I did, have faith. I'm a man. I go to church. I'm a man of faith. That's a big part of my life, and I felt like if I did the right thing and ran my business the right way, God would provide for me and my family. And that was important, to me. And so painting, luckily I chose painting, and I jumped right into it with no experience, and it was hard. So when you jump into a business, and you're not getting a salary, you know you've got to provide by getting work yourself. And I started off, just doing flyers, doing pull tags, um, letting all of our friends know, hey, we'll paint your house. And, if you work at it, one of the things about the trades and even painting, itself, everybody has not that everybody has a house, but a lot of people have homes. Everybody that has a home needs a home that's painted inside and outside. And there's just an unlimited amount of work out there. You just have to, understand how to go get it. And I was bound and determined to get the work. And once we started getting work, we weren't painters by trade. I wasn't a journeyman painter. It was a matter of just learning the trade by trial and error. And that was probably the hardest part. Getting the work wasn't hard. It was learning the trade of painting without having somebody behind me as a journeyman coaching my way through it.
As in the with our show, we're supported by Grind Coffee Co. And we like to talk to our guests about like grind time. So perfect example in your situation. You decided to you get your severance package and you're just like all in. And it was probably great at the beginning. But when that when that excitedness kind of wore off, when the novelty of something new and exciting wore off, what do you think, what inside of you got you through that? Through the, oh my gosh, okay, we got the work, but I don't know anything, or not anything, but you said yourself that you weren't, you're not a journey, or you weren't a journeyman painter, and there were times where you had to learn stuff. Like, where did that come from? The drive, the grind. Where did the energy for that grind come from?
I think um, a lot of it came from my father. My father was, a workaholic, and he instilled in me, hard work ethics, and you know, I was a workaholic for many years myself too, but I think, part of, you know, I jumped right into it, and I knew that I would work countless hours. I would do whatever it takes to succeed. What, I didn't know was, painting some trim in a house would be so difficult, and that, the first time I did it, I would fail so miserably. And I think, you know, my drive and determination and not willing to, take failure as, this is, my destiny. I was like, you know what? This first job, didn't turn out the way I wanted it to do, but I knew that I could do better. And I was going to I was bound and determined to learn from my mistakes. And so, I just said, you know what? I'm gonna, fix the problems that arose here and the disaster that arose, and see if I can do it better next time. And I've been an athlete, all my life too, and I think that, you that part of me, just kind of goes right into the work ethic too. You're going to fail as an athlete, all the time, and then you just come back, you work harder, and you just develop good work ethics to correct those problems, come back bigger, better, and stronger, the next time you attempt to do what you're doing. And I think, as an owner, brand new owner of a company, I was never going to accept failure, is the ultimate answer and solution. So, you know, um, and it was the same with, getting work. I think you touched on it. I think you start off and you have kind of like, all your family, they're like, oh, we want to help you out. You're going to paint your friend's house. You're going to paint your mom's house. You're going to paint your dad's house. Eventually that all runs out, and so eventually it's based on, you generating work, after, all your contacts are all worn out. And I think it's just, sitting back and going, now, what's the solution, to this problem? I don't have any work. How am I going to go get work? And in work ethic, became a big part of that. And I'll tell you, like, just to give you an example, you know, I have worked out all my life, and that's been a big part of my life. We would go out and we would paint, throughout the day, and we would get a job. We would paint, yeah, 8, 9, 10, even up to 12 hours a day. When we were done with that job, for the day, I knew I had to generate work. After this job was done, I would drive around to every Albertsons in the Treasure Valley, which had, these community boards that have pull tags where you can, create a little pull tag that says, I'll paint, free estimates. Did this loop, and I started around 8 o'clock, and I drove to each Albertsons, changed out and put a brand new flyer up. If mine was ripped down by a competitor or somebody, I put a new one up. I ended up my route usually around 11 o'clock at night at Gold's Gym, and Gold's Gym closed at midnight. So I'd end up at Gold's Gym, I'd work out till midnight, then I'd go home, sleep, and get up and do it. I did that every single day for years. And I was bound and determined to get work. And that was just one of the things that kind of just showed my willingness to, do whatever it took, and then continue to live my life, and do the things I love,
Yeah.
Oh,
That starting out point, like you were saying, when people go into any career, more importantly, for example, for the trades here, when you're an owner, that stress of, like you're saying, catching or putting the work in not only to finish the job you're currently at, but the time spent, the blood, sweat, and tears of searching, all that time. You're going to bed at midnight, waking up, 6, 7, you're sleeping 6 hours a day, 7 hours a day, maybe, and just rinse and repeat for how many weeks, how many months, years. That's going to be taxing on somebody, and being able to be energized at the job to know that, this job's going to run out. You've got a family to provide for. Um, it's very hard being a business owner from the sounds of it. And I must applaud you for the time, and because I think we're in a generation now where that work ethic, we deal with a lot of students and younger generations, and sometimes it's not there. They don't
Yeah.
they don't have that understanding of what is actually hard work, and putting that grind time in to be successful. Lots of people just want it to happen, and but you have to be putting the boots to the ground and making contact.
Yeah.
It's a full embodied position.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, you have a good point, and I think, like, so, for your students and people looking and going into the trades, there's two options. I mean, you don't have to start your own business to get into the trades. You can go become a painter and work for somebody, and so you don't have to go the route I did. I jumped right in. I started my own business, and so that's like the hardest thing to do, is not even be a journeyman, start your own business, but you can get right into the trades, and the trades are amazing working just in the trades for somebody else. And but um, it looks different starting your own company. The big difference is owning your own company. I think, like, more than anything, I wanted to know that I owned my own company and have that. It was like that sense of satisfaction that I own a company. And and it was, I probably worked twice as many hours as I would have worked if I would have just started as a painter and working for somebody. But on the same token, owning your own company gives you so much freedom. I had 3 kids. I still got 3 kids and a wife, and I wanted the freedom to be able to go to all my kids' events whenever they, were competing in sports, where I didn't have to ask somebody, "Hey, can I have time off to go to their game? Can I have time off to go to their practice?" Because I was, like, highly involved in my family's life, and I went to their practices. I went to their games. I didn't want to miss anything, and so having that freedom to do that, was a big part of, owning a company, and the value to it. And so, you got two routes that you can go, and either route, can be rewarding. You don't have to own your own company to be a painter, to be a framer, to be a drywaller, to be a HVAC. Majority of people don't. Majority of people, work for a company. So, but to me, man, owning my own company, the hardest thing I've ever done, but the most rewarding, the most valuable thing I've ever done too. So
I love it. I love well, you mentioned how um you've mentioned a few times, you've said the words problem solving. And I'm wondering if, like, obviously you're a problem solver by trade, do we say? Um and you've mentioned a few times, do what it takes. You just do what it takes. Is there anything else, or like have you where have you got those, the traits of being a problem solver? Where did that come from? Or did it just come from a place of, okay, I don't know what's happening now, but we'll do what it takes to find the problem? Like, was there like some sort of, growing up, did you have, like, you talked about your father, was he a good problem solver, or was it just like, I'm jumping in and we'll do whatever it takes to solve these problems?
I'll use one example, and it goes back to sports, because I've been an athlete my entire life, from a very young age, and I still compete even now, as in my mid late 50s. I raced bikes in the first road race that I ever competed in. I was racing in this road race, and we went over some hills. Eventually, I was dropped from the group, which is called the peloton, and I was dropped alone, and I was just riding by myself, and the peloton was up the road. Eventually, there were some other stragglers on the road too, and um and it was very frustrating to me, because the race was up the road, and I knew I wasn't going to win. And whenever I compete, man, I want to win. I want to be on the podium so so bad. I'm like so competitive internally, and it just drove me crazy. And like I was on the road, and I almost just wanted to quit, like riding my bike. And all of a sudden, another rider came up to me and caught up to me, and he's like, "Hey, catch on. We'll see if we can catch another guy and catch the group." And so eventually we rode together, worked together, caught another bike, and as you catch more bikes, you're kind of like getting faster as you ride as a group, and we're like solving this problem as catching the group ahead of us. And it was crazy. Eventually got another bike, and eventually we caught the large group, the peloton, and then we hit another hill, and I got kicked off the back again. And so I was just like and I was almost in tears, and as an adult, and I was just like, you know how does this not happen again, because I want to race again. And so I just started reading books about tactics in bike racing. I started reading books on because back then you didn't have YouTube and all this stuff. I started reading how to increase my endurance and how to overcome this. And so it was a matter of trying to come up with a solution to the problem, getting dropped with the peloton, so next time I can be at the peloton and be there at the finish to hopefully sprint to win. And so as an athlete, you got to overcome things all the time, and you got to troubleshoot it and figure out how can you get to the end point. And a lot of times the end point is actually winning. That kind of translated right into being a painter. The very first time I painted the trim in this house, I got runs all over the trim. And I was trying to figure out like why I got runs. What I did is I sanded it out, I did it again, and I got runs again. And literally I redid this house 4 times. Eventually I got to a point where, in my career, I understood, like I was so in tune with painting trim. I understood if it was too cold, I'm like, okay, I got to bump the temperature up. I would walk into a house and I would go, oh my gosh, it feels a little bit too humid. That's going to cause the paint to run. I understood like temperature. I understood humidity. I understood different paints like different conditions, the ambient temperature of the substrate you're painting. I would touch it and go, oh my gosh, that's too cold. And so I would like, the problem would happen is I would paint something, fisheye would show up. I'm like, okay, what caused that problem? How am I going to resolve that? And then once I resolve that, I kind of put it in the bank in case it happened again. And so it's different because I grew up as a self-taught painter in the trades, and every time I ran into a problem, I had to come up with a solution. And a lot of times I failed again. And I'm like, okay, what caused that to fail? And so I was banking all these problems in my brain and all these solutions. When you start painting, for me, I show you the right way in the very beginning. And so you don't have to problem solve yourself. And so a lot of the painters that just are taught the right way don't have the good advantage and the big advantage that I had by learning, myself. But so it just goes back to, I think, sports in general, being an athlete in general, so much of that translated right into the trades and just, help me troubleshoot some of those things, not get frustrated, and just say, you know what, I'm going to quit. I'm going to go into something else. I'll be a drywaller, or I'm just going to go back to the desk and work on a computer because I can't do this. I mean, as an athlete, I never accepted failure. I would always figure out a way to win. I wrestled. I was a power lifter. I was a bodybuilder. I raced bikes, mountain bikes, road bikes. I competed in CrossFit. In everything I competed in, I was always trying to develop, solutions to problems of me not being able to walk on my hands as a CrossFitter. How am I going to fix that? So yeah, it's that's athlete sports in general will teach you so much about life and about work.
Do you think going through the way that you went with going through your failures and learning from them, do you feel that you have a better um, theoretical understanding? Like you're talking about moisture and all this other stuff that can affect paint runs. do you feel that you're more well versed and have a better understanding versus, say, like you're talking about bringing a painter in and showing them the correct way? Well, they know the correct way, but do they understand the variables and the different, I guess, different variables that can affect paint runs, or a project you're working on? You know, you're talking about the moisture content, the substrates too hot or cold, the temperature, like all of these sensories that you have. You feel that through all those trials and tribulations, probably a lot of failures, like you're talking about, learning from that. Do you feel that theoretical knowledge is kind of the driver when you get into these different projects?
It is, and you know, I'll give you an example too, that I had an employee work for me for, 3 years, and, everybody eventually wants to spray. It's like that's the ultimate goal, is to get a spray gun in your hand. And I was teaching him, how to spray trim. And, eventually, he got to a point where he was, spraying trim, himself. And I was off, out doing bids or something, and doing something. I came back to this house, and he was going to be spraying all the trim in this really big house. And I came back to this house to come in, and I knew he was all done spraying. And so I was going to inspect the spray job that he did. As soon as I opened the door, I was like, oh my gosh, we've got a major problem. I knew instantly it was too cold. It was too humid in the house, and I knew we were going to have a disaster. I walked around, and it was a major disaster. There was runs everywhere. So the temperature needed to be cranked up to at least 80 degrees. And by cranking up the temperature, forced air heating takes moisture out of the air too. If you understand how forced air heating, works too. So you need to dry out the air. You need to get the air temperature up, and then you do that, an hour prior to spraying the trim. So like, the ambient temperature of the trim will start to warm up too. And so all these things is like, it, it's really hard to teach somebody that.
Mm.
It's like, I'd say, can you feel how moist it is? I mean, eventually, I would fail over and over, and I'm like, gosh, it feels really moist in here. I can see condensation on the window, and I would see and observe all these things and go, that doesn't seem right. All these things, and I would like just evaluate it all. And you know, there's no substitute for time on the job. It's like you can't learn all these things just overnight. I teach a lot of these concepts and a lot of these things on, YouTube. I've got over 1,700 videos on my channel, and a lot of these things I can teach, so you can get to that endpoint faster than I got to. But once again, there's no substitute for that time. One thing I like to say, and this I came up with this saying a long time ago, and it was, the only difference between a journeyman painter and an apprentice painter is the journeyman knows how to fix everything. And there's a big difference to that. In Until, like when the sprayer breaks down and it's your only sprayer, um, all the guys on the crew, none of them like, what do I do with it? Well, you're going to have to take it down to somebody to fix it, but you got to get it going right now. And so, like, to me, I just had to start tearing things apart, and I learned on the job how to fix a sprayer. And it's like, there's just so much truth to that. And the journeyman eventually, but it's interesting because there's a lot of people that don't have a desire to learn. A lot of the guys that were on my crew, they don't have a desire to learn because they don't have a desire to make this a career the rest of their life. I loved my job painting. I loved uh, being in the trades, being a painter, and it was something that I wanted to learn every day on the job. I went to school. I went to college. I was in college for 9 years, and in the difference between going to college, I went to college for 9 years, and eventually, finally, got a job outside of college. I looked at the trades as my college in the trades is every day learning. And I learned something new every day. I was out painting yesterday with a new tool somebody sent me on a fence, and I learned something new that day. Every day I learned something. I absolutely love what I do because I'm learning something new every day. My college is every day on the job site, and if something didn't turn out right, I'm going to find a solution to make it faster, and more efficient. And my ultimate goal with running my business was to, my goal was to make happy customers. I mean, that was really important to me. But I also wanted to make a lot of money. I wanted to make a lot of money because I wanted to have financial freedom. I wanted to give my kids everything I didn't have. I wanted to give my wife a big, nice house. And I wanted to have nice toys so I can, experience things with my kids. So I wanted to make a lot of money, and I was bound and determined to make a lot of money in painting, and I eventually did. And I found a way to not paint a house in a week, but to paint a house in a day eventually, and not to paint one house every 2 weeks but to paint 5 houses in a week. And when you start to do the math, that it eventually becomes a lot of money. And so learning was just something I loved and I valued. And whatever trade you go into, whether you're a framer, drywaller, electrician, plumbing, I mean, if if you search and watch around you and just and take it all in, you'll learn something of value every single day you're on a job.
Did you
You
have
know,
any, like, coming up when you're learning all this stuff? Did you have any mentors or any people you could go to, or you could, had them on speed dial that you could call and, hey, I'm having this, or was it all just school of hard knocks? You had to learn it yourself.
that's a really good question too. And so YouTube didn't exist when I got into the trades. Cell phones, they started becoming, a little bit popular. They were large, bulky things, flip things, and kind of weird. But not a lot of people had them. You know, in order to learn the trades, the only way you can really learn was through books. And you know and the trades are different now because a lot of people hated me. I was one of the very first people that started putting videos out there to teach and educate, and there's a reason why I was doing what I was doing. And there was multiple reasons, but I was hated because I'm giving away all the trade secrets. And so you would literally, you'd walk into a paint store, no painters would talk to each other because he's taking food off my plate, he's taking food
Oh,
off my plate. So we wouldn't share information, man. It was very private, and we were all the enemy. And I didn't like that, man. I was uncomfortable with that. And unfortunately there was nobody to teach me but my partner who I went into business with, Darren Kinley. And that's the case. So it was B&K Painting, it was Barry and Kinley. And Darren, he was and still is the hardest worker I've ever met in my entire life. There was nobody that worked harder than that guy. And I thought I was the hardest worker, on the planet. And Darren would run everywhere. If he was on one side of the house, needed something out of the van, he ran to get it. And the man still is. He owns Duration Painting now, and he's just incredible. And I looked up to him, almost idolized him. I mean, I his work ethic was amazing. He was a lot like me personality wise. He was an athlete, too, and we had a lot of the similar traits. And he was obsessed with learning the trade of painting, and I learned so much from him. I just learned from his obsession of learning, and tell one story, that impacted me, for the rest of my life. And we were working on this door, and we were just scraping by, not making a lot of money. And we were gonna do this person's front door and pickle stain this front door. And I was living paycheck to paycheck, and we were doing this door, and we just absolutely ruined this door. And I was almost ready to start crying. And Darren, was just like looking at me. I'm like, what are we gonna do, man? It's like, we're not going to make any money on the door for one thing. We're probably going to lose money on the door. And he started laughing because I think I had tears in my eyes. And because I'm like, I gotta like, pay for dinner for my wife and kids, man. And he started laughing at me, and he just said, Chris, he said, it's only a door. It's like, it's fixable. And he goes, if it's not fixable, I'll buy her another door. I don't care. He's like, you can't take things so seriously, and you can't like let this door make you upset. And I was just like, you know what, Darren, you're right. It's like, it is only a door. And if we have to buy a new door, $800 on the next job will make up the $800. And it was interesting because I had faith in Darren that he was right. And I also had faith in God that if I did the right thing for this customer and bought her a new door, that God would provide a job probably the next day or the next week that was three times that amount that would make it up. And so Darren, that what I learned from Darren is nothing is ever worth, just losing all hope and all faith that, what, employees are going to break things, they're going to damage things. It's all replaceable. I've had employees, cause a lot of damage and a lot of money on job sites. One guy stepped on a stove that cost me 15 grand. It was a custom stove from England. And I just looked at it and it's just a stove. But the person that broke the stove is more valuable than the stove. And so I learned that from Darren. And so he taught me so much about life, so much about painting that I can never repay him.
That
That's fascinating.
I'm even thinking how to do that.
Squirming.
Well, just it's just material things, and
Yeah.
you can put a value to it. I'm very anal about my vehicles out, but it gets to a point where now it's kind of like, okay, it's just a truck, it's just this. Do you find you had to be in that environment where Darren was very, I guess, nurturing and giving his advice like that? Because that's something everybody. I mean, you can hear that people say, it's just a stove. It's just a stove you wrecked, $15,000 stove. But to get past that point of like, do you still have frustration when that happens, or is it more of that learning moment? Can you explain that a bit? Because sometimes when I run into things, even with my kids or something, I snap, and it's just a thing that doesn't matter, But how do you train your brain or your mindset or skill sets for that matter to always refocus onto it's just a thing?
That one incident with Darren, had like a profound impact on me, the rest of my life. And that doesn't mean that, you know, um, every time after that it was simple and easy. It's, I mean, we are human beings. We do have emotions. There are things that are going to hurt. There are things that you know are going to cost you. There are times, with my emotions, I did fail. I mean, after that event, I'm not proud of it, but one of an employee ruined a ton of brushes of mine, at one time after me telling him like, this is how you do it, this is how you do it, over and over. And I got so mad I threw a brush at him. And you know so just because Darren instilled that into me in that one incident, it still was hard. And it's just like life. It's just like a marriage. I mean, I've been married for 35 years. It's work. I mean, marriage is a lot of work. Raising kids is a lot of work. You're going to always have failures, and you just learn from those failures and go, okay, I made a mistake, forgive yourself, and just say, next time I'm going to do it better. I try to, like, instill those same ideas with my employees. I had an employee, once, two employees, that they drove off with a van, had a brand new expensive pressure washer, brand new, never used, in the back of the vehicle, and they forgot to put the sliding door down. It tumbled out. Obviously did a lot of damage to it. And they tried to cover it up by painting in the pressure washer all the scratch, dings, dents. And eventually, days later, I jumped in the back of the van, and when it falls out of the van at going 40 miles an hour, no matter what you do, when I jump in there and see it, it's going to be noticeable. But in essence, they lied by trying to hide it instead of just saying, calling up and saying, Chris, we made a big mistake. And as soon as they would have said that to me, on my phone, my heart would have sank, and my $3,000 pressure wash, I would have like, oh my gosh. But then I also know those guys, are important people. They have emotions. They're terrified, of me. I'm not like a small guy. I'm this big guy with tattoos. I do look intimidating and stuff. But you know, my lesson to them was I eventually I was mad. I was mad that they lied to me. I was really mad, and I was so mad. And the one guy was so embarrassed. He went home and couldn't face me for 2 days. But like eventually, when he came back, I'm like, look, man, what's more what's more important to me in life is your character, and not the thing that I mean, I can replace that pressure washer, but your character says a lot about you as an employee. For me, your character is who you're representing on me to my customers and stuff. And it's just a kind of a learning lesson. It was a teaching lesson to try to teach him that I'm going to be upset, but you're going to have to face that. But I'm not going to fire you. I never once had fired an employee ever for damaging anything. And so, and I think that's actually illegal too. You can't actually do that, even though employers do all the time. But they damage stuff all the time, and I'm like, it's cool. We'll fix it. We'll make it up on the next job. The 15,000, take us 3 houses. And I wanted them to learn from me that, look, the same. I wanted, like what Darren taught me, I wanted to teach it in other people. And so that's the long answer.
I was just gonna ask that. Did you like? Do you think that since you didn't have a mentor, like a specific, like you had Darren, but also, do you think you're trying to be that same mentor for your staff, for the people that work for you, that the one that maybe you didn't have growing up or coming up in the business?
I think that was one of the things that I eventually, did learn, because over time, one of the things I learned as I was going through my career is that in the beginning, I wasn't a good boss. I was so focused on, making money and not losing money, and that, when things would go, bad, I would get, upset, upset at the person for costing me money, and upset that we were going to lose money, or that its schedule wasn't going so well, and I wasn't like as good communicating to my employees. And I started watching a lot of podcasts and videos on being a better boss, and communicating with your employees. And that was one of the things that um, it may, like, just because I got a YouTube channel and I've got 1,700 videos, it may seem like I'm a good communicator and this all comes natural, but I'm not. I'm a horrible communicator. I'm a good, worker. I'm a workaholic. I learn well. I've learned the trades fast and well, but communicating with my employees was probably the biggest challenge I ever had in my career. And being a good boss was one of the probably, and I still am. I got employees that work for me now, and I'm an introvert. I'm quiet. I don't like to talk a lot. Even though it may sound like I like to on this podcast, it's not. It's still one of my biggest, weaknesses. And so it was a challenge, just communicating with employees, and trying to do what is right, and make an environment that was pleasant for them to work in. And I think that's a lot of painters, in the trades, that a lot of the business owners, it's because I had guys come from me from a lot of other painting companies, and they said it sucked working for the bosses sucked it, like, and so I didn't want to be like that. And it took a long time. And I would think by the time I sold my painting company, I was a lot better, but not the best I can be. I'm still not the best I can be at it. So,
Got to keep working through it. It's probably that lifelong learning. That's the nice thing with the trades, and you've touched on this prior too about college. It's every day you're learning something. That the gratifying piece of the trades is that, and I don't think anybody could ever get to a point where they know everything. But there's continually, like for yourself, you have materials, you have different paints, stains, tools, brushes, all this really cool stuff that you get to try out and learn and pass that on to employees. And through your YouTube channel, you're educating people, which I think is, there's lots of negatives with social media and these different things, but the education side where somebody can go and watch some videos, you might do a review on special, I think, Stinger paintbrushes, different things like that. People can go in and, oh, I learned something. And to build off of this, during COVID, I had our kids were out of daycare because we were shut down. I finished my basement and I purged your videos for probably about a month straight. Every single video I could find, I had built up to the point where, okay, I'm going to buy everything. I bought the paint sprayer. I was going to spray my own trim walls because I'm like, Idaho painter Chris Berry has taught me how to do this. And it came to a very small point when I was going to mix the paint and put in the gun. And I think the drywaller said, oh, I could paint it for this much. And kind of like you were mentioning, there's the humidity and all this stuff. And something in my gut just, I have all this theoretical knowledge from these videos and he makes it look easy, but it probably isn't. And I don't want to have to deal with runs because I want to get the basement done. So, having that educational piece is awesome. And it's a good foundation, but it also comes, you have to put that work in to be able to fully understand what you're doing too. Right. So, um,
Yeah.
yeah, my YouTube was full of your videos and
Yeah,
I had
that's
built it up in my head that I'm a painter. Chris Berry has
yeah.
taught me everything. I went to the paint store, got the Titan. I think I asked you some questions on Instagram about tip sizes and you'd replied right away. And I was like, I'm going to do this. My wife was like, are you sure? Yeah, I'm going to do it. And then I wussed out and took the paint sprayer back, but
Yeah, yeah,
it
yeah,
was,
yeah.
it was a good learning
Big
curve.
return that day. Big return that day.
But that's just the power of social media and that educational piece. And you deal with so many, like, a question I have with, I guess, different tips and stuff. How do you, like, you do exteriors, you do fencing, you do interiors? Is that all just through your trials and tribulations? Because some people might advance or might specialize, I should say, in trim painting or interior. Well, you do fence, decks, all that different stuff. Does that keep you excited when you are able to do different projects? And do you take joy from that?
It does. And I think, one of the things my employees would even say is, they we're constantly just going from house to house and they're seeing something new like all the time. So you're on an exterior, you're on an interior, and like when we would get on an apartment complex and we'd be there for a month, the guys would be just like, gosh, this is just so boring, it's the same old scenery and stuff. And yeah, it's like being a painter, and when you become like a full service painter, you're just exposed to, a lot of different things. I mean, some guys are just, they specialize in just doing new construction. So you're just sanding endless for days. But I mean, I did epoxy floors, I did fences, I did cabinets, I did interiors, exteriors, I did murals, I did wallpaper. So there's so many different things. I mean, obviously you have to learn all those things. And, you know, in every single aspect, I learned it all by trial and error. And I'll tell you, like, just to give you another example, the first time we decided to do a set of kitchen cabinets, we went and did these set of kitchen cabinets, went and picked up the doors. We're going to come back and spray them, at my place, and the doors fish-eyed everywhere. It was a disaster. There was some type of contamination on the door. Eventually, we figured out that they probably cleaned the cabinets with pledge and stuff. But we thought we resolved the problem. We sprayed them again. They fish-eyed. I was like, oh my gosh, this is a disaster. We eventually contacted some automotive paint company, said, what is causing this problem and how to resolve it? And they said, you got to use this product called Smoothie, put it in there. It basically is 100% silicone, but it's going to contaminate your equipment. And so we did that. And then it still had the problem. And we're like, oh my God, we're on the fourth time painting all these cabinet doors. And then we painted them a third time. It was a third time. And then we're like, okay, now we got to get them to the house. And last time we transported them, we had a problem. This time we're going to wrap them in bubble wrap, and nothing could go wrong because they're all wrapped in bubble wrap. We're going to transport them there. We unwrapped them from the bubble wrap. Because they were wrapped in bubble wrap, they were outgassing the bubbles everywhere where the
Oh.
bubble was touching it. It caused a little this like ghosting spot on them. It was a disaster. We had to haul back, sand them, and shoot them again. I lost a lot of money on that job, and my supervisor who was with me the whole time, he was just like, you know, what's interesting, Chris, about you is nothing bothers you. And I'm like, you know what, John, we're learning so much on this one job that we'll probably be able to troubleshoot our way through every other job after that. So I'm paying, like, this is like college. I'm paying to learn. Eventually we're going to get it right. The customer's going to love us. We're going to be happy. And then, so we're just paying for education right here. And so, that was, after a long time, in my career, I've been a painter for quite a while when we decided to take on cabinets, because I'm like, you can never make money in cabinets. Eventually we figured out how to make money in cabinets through systems and processes. But once again, this is like, I wanted to, do cabinets because we weren't making money doing interiors, because here in Idaho you can't paint outside in the wintertime, it's too cold. So you gotta so now cabinets, if we start doing cabinets, we can make money. And so I'm like, we got to figure out how to do this. And it's the same. So eventually I same trial and error, learned how to do epoxy floors, learned how to do, decorative coatings. And to me, it's fun. And that's the one thing about, and this is where I'll just give a pitch, to becoming a painter, because we got a welder here, we've got a wood shop guy here. There's a lot of different routes you can go, but as a painter, somebody, if you're working on your exterior, the person takes off, they give you the keys to your house. We paint a house in a day. They go to work, their house is all faded, it looks dingy, it looks old. They come back from work, they drive up, they're like, oh my gosh, my house looks amazing. And you're making people happy every day, literally every day, whether it's painting this room, you're painting their bedroom, you paint their kitchen cabinets, they come home and you're just doing amazing things. And it's amazing every time that people are just like, gosh, they love you, they love you. It's like you're making people happy, putting a smile on people's faces. And I'm going to flip that, because on the flip side, I was a police officer,
Oh,
so we'll expose that. I worked in law enforcement for 6 7 years, something like that. And all you do as a police officer is piss people off every day. That's all you do. It's the most depressing, non-rewarding career um that you can have, because of politics and stuff. And I mean, you go to try to solve a family fight, then you told Johnny, you got to behave, because you're making your parents mad, and then the parent gets mad because you talked to him wrong. And then you pulled somebody over because they ran a stop sign, and they can kill somebody on a bike, and you gave them a warning, but then they file a complaint, because you talked to them wrong in the traffic stop. It was every day I was dealing with internal affairs. It was a nightmare. And the only people that understood you was fellow police officers. And so you become very cliquey and tight niched. And I left that, and went from that to painting, pissing people off every day, to making people happy every day. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And this is the most amazing career that you can have. And I think, like, one of the things have been teaching, and when people one of the things people pick up, over my videos over time, is people are learning this, is you can be proud to be a tradesman. And I mean, I left the suit and tie job, I went to becoming a painter, which you don't even need a high school education to do. And I was never not proud of that. I was always proud to be a painter, to have a painting company. I would show up to all my kids' events covered in paint and painter's clothes. I was never once not proud of that. I never looked it down upon myself saying I'm only a painter. I've always told myself I am a painter. I'm an awesome painter. And I'm just as valuable as any doctor, any lawyer out there, because we all need legal services. We all need to go to the doctor, but we all need our house painted too. And so I always felt like, from day one, that I was valuable, doing what I was doing. And I didn't start off, making this kind of money, but I'll tell you, like within a year, I told myself I wanted to be paid $100 an hour or $1,000 a day as a painter, and I was going to figure out how I was going to get paid that. And eventually, I did. I got paid a lot more than that, and you can do it. And it's just, once again, it's a pitch to the trades. It's a pitch to painting, man. It's like, this is something you can be proud of. This is something you can, go to work with a smile on your face every single day and be proud of. And to give you another example, because I like to give examples, did a guest appearance, and this guy showed up. After I did this appearance, we went out to dinner. Everybody was at this big dinner table and hanging out with me. And this one guy, he stood up and said, I got to say something. He goes, my wife is, a big executive, and she's very well known. And he goes, I own a painting company. And he goes, I go to these events with my wife because, of who she is, and, so high up in this company. And he goes, I was always afraid to tell people what I did. And he goes, I was always ashamed to tell people what I did, because my wife is, this big wig, and I'm just a painter, and I'm nobody. And he said, after, doing the guest appearance, he's like, Chris, and he said, the Idaho Painter, he goes, I'll never be ashamed. And again, I'll always, when I go to my wife's events, I'm going to tell people I'm a painter, and I'll never be ashamed of it. I'm going to be proud of it. And that's the way everybody should be, man. Whether you're a welder, a drywaller, a framer, a roofer, insulator, be proud of what you do. And I think that's one of my big things, in my videos, teaching people, that you can be proud of what you can do. You can make really good money doing this. You don't have to go to college and spend 150 grand on an education to make a lot of money. And eventually, I told myself, when I started in the trades, I started my painting company right off the bat. I said, I'm going to build this company to sell this company. And I eventually sold it and did well selling it. And so, I just can't say enough about it, man. Hopefully, it encourages the people watching this, that this is something you can go do.
Love that. You hit so many. Oh man, I loved one thing that stuck out to me. What you just when you were talking about the big financial mistakes. Well, the mistakes that cost you money or whatever that you're paying for. It's an education in those times. I've never heard it said like that before. Like I've never, because so many times like, oh, this is gonna cost me. Even for me working on my vehicles, like do something and then oh I screwed this up so I need to buy another part, or even it's a little bit over my head, I better take it in now, that's going to cost me money, but I learned. That's a really cool perspective to take. I've never heard anyone say that before, and I think a lot of people need to hear that. So thank you for sharing that. That's really cool to me. Do you have a point though when you like going back to Hoff's story, is there ever a point, a reasonable point where you go, this is too much for me, I need to pass it off? Or are you just like, let's figure it out?
Um, there's a couple incidences that, you know, um, you know, strike me. There's, and that kind of, like, that question could, I could answer a couple different things. And one of them is, there's times when, owning my own business, there's times when I go out and do bids that I get a bad feeling and bad vibe, from a customer, because of the questions that they're asking me and stuff. And I'm just going, my gut intuition tells me that, I should just pass on this. But early in my career, is like, I can't afford to pass on it, because I need to pay my bills. And I'll tell you, like, almost every time that my gut tuition told me that, hey, do not take this job because there's something that you got a bad feeling, it ended up turning bad, and I ended up not getting paid on three of those jobs, and which was a lot of money. And so, when you feel something inside, it usually is true, and it usually you have to just go with your gut. um, and there's another incident, when kind of touching on that subject. Your question is, I painted this person's house, and there's this common issue called wax bleed, which causes paint to not stick to people's houses and stuff. And I painted this house that had that condition. Eventually, the customer sued me, went to court, went to district court. And this was one of the most costly mistakes that I ever paid for. And I did everything right when I painted the person's house, and this issue is caused by a failure of siding, not a failure of paint or a failure of any painter of how they applied the paint. And so, and I knew that, and I was the expert in this field because I was the one that discovered this condition, and I discovered it with Columbia Paints, and eventually worked on their chemists, and eventually worked with the chemist of Sherwin-Williams on this incident with this house with it. And in my pride, this is where sometimes I can be a little bit prideful, and I knew I was right. And this was in district court, and it was costing me a lot of money. It was coming out of my pocket. And I showed up out of the job site to inspect it with the other attorney, the opposing attorney, and he walked up to me to shake my hand. And in my opinion, he was the enemy because he was suing me with his client, and he's not my friend. And unfortunately, that was the wrong attitude to have. I mean, he's another person, another human being. Came up to shake my hand, and I said, "I'm not going to shake your hand." And he looked at me and he said, "You're going to pay for this." And and he did. He made me pay. And eventually, in court, before I went to trial, my attorney said, Chris, if you want this to go to a jury trial, you got a 50-50 chance of winning. That's just the way the court system is. And he goes, if you let your pride get to you and you take this all the way, you're going to pay me at least 150,000 in attorney's fees. And do you want to take that risk? And their attorney said, we'll cut a deal. If Chris, because he's a jerk, and what he did, wouldn't shake my hand, he's going to write me a check for $30,000. And it was one of the hardest things to do in my life, and is that write that dude a $30,000 check, because and I knew it's partly because of my pride, my ego, but it could end up costing me 10 times more, because I was 100% sure I was going to win in court because I was right. But we all know our legal system. It's not about who's right or wrong. And so I wrote that attorney a check for $30,000 right there, walked out of the court. And I told myself, I was like, okay, I can spend the next 3 months in court, or I could write this man a check for $30,000 right now and get my butt out there and start working, painting houses. Because all I got to do is 5,000 house, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 6 houses, paint 6 houses. It pays off that $30,000. I'm broken even, and then I can get on with my life. And that's the way I looked at it. Walked out of that courtroom, said, I got to get to work. Let's go to work. And that was it. And it was a $30,000 hit, man. So you got to know when to quit, when to cut your losses, when to swallow your pride, swallow your ego, when it's just time to go earn money, and let your emotions not hold you back. And so if that all makes sense.
Oh yeah.
That's the hardest part, is keeping your emotions back, right? Whether it's from lack of sleep, you're having problems at home, people with young kids, not getting sleep or having that going through the tantrum stages, to
Oh
not,
yeah.
to hold your emotions. Sometimes, when we're having a chat like this, oh yeah, it's easy to, you know, you're burning daylight at the candle at both ends, and sometimes it's hard to do that, and you almost need that. I don't know if you need a person or a mentor, a friend, somebody close to be able to check, maybe a spouse potentially. But you got to be able to check that, because like you said,
Right.
you start saying a couple other things to that attorney, well, that $30,000 check, that could have been maybe 50 or 60, or like you said,
Right.
you could have been stubborn and took that thing the whole way, and you're probably painting 10 times the houses to break even, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
um,
Yeah.
so as we are coming up here, we've talked a lot about whole bunch of stuff about the paint industry and your experience in it. Sometimes we like to get little tips for our listeners. The weather's getting a little bit nicer here. People are, wanting to barbecue and be outside. Um, do you have a pro tip or something for somebody who wants to, who needs to stain their fence? They're looking at just making it a little bit nicer. Is there some tips that you would suggest? I see you are working with a new machine where you can send your picket boards through the stain machine. And could you just give our listeners some tips for staining their fence so they can enjoy their yard and their fence this summer?
Um, when it comes to like a pro tip, and we'll just speak to do-it-yourselfers, and the most common mistake is not applying enough product. And typically, what happens is with do-it-yourselfers, we'll get a bid from a professional painter like me or any other professional painter that's actually doing the fence right. Um, the cost, you're going to see it, and the cost is a lot of money. And because what you don't understand is if you do it right, it takes a lot of product. Your fence takes a lot of product, it absorbs a lot of product. So what happens is do-it-yourselfers will grab a weed sprayer and just spray, a fine mist of the product on. Eventually, like it'll look blotchy, like really fast. It'll look streaky and have stripes all over it. And it doesn't just have that deep, rich look to it. And it's because you're not saturating the wood with product. And so typically for a do-it-yourselfer, if you go into it thinking, okay, I think I need a gallon. In reality, you're probably going to need 3 gallons in reality. So you're probably going to use 3 times more if you want it to look correctly. And so there's a lot of different ways you can apply it. The fastest and easiest way is an airless sprayer. An airless sprayer doing a fence is you don't have to be good at all to use an airless sprayer on a fence because you're just getting product on fast, just back and fast. But spray it and backbrush it. It's when it comes to doing a fence and making a fence look amazing, the backbrushing process is extremely important. So saturate it, spray it, and backbrush it as you go. You can't backbrush it like after you've gone like 20 yards. You got to spray and backbrush as you go, but just saturate the wood, put tons of product on, and it's going to keep soaking it up. And so I can't say it enough that even a lot of professional painters put like a quarter of what they should put on a fence, and that's why the fences don't just look rich and just look amazing. If you look at some of the videos I just posted on my social media and you go, wow, that fence looks good, it's loading it on, load it on, put as much as you can on.
Do you ever wipe off, or do you like you're saying you spray back brush and then do you just let that soak in, or do you ever come to a point? Because I can't remember what kind of stain. I've got a cedar fence. I slap it on with a big fence brush, a 6-inch wide brush, maybe do an 8-foot panel, and then I go back and wipe off. Am I doing that wrong? Should you just
You don't on okay, you don't on a fence, you would never need to have to wipe it off. On a deck, because now it's a horizontal surface, anything that's pooling and sitting on there, if you're using an oil-based product, it will not dry and it will stay tacky over time. So if you're using an oil-based product on a deck, you put it on. Once it's done soaking in, anything left on top, you have to wipe it off. Use rags to wipe it off. On a fence, you just soak it, pour it on. Eventually, if you're too much, it's just going to run down the fence, and eventually it's going to absorb into the fence. And it's not gonna be a horizontal surface where it will stay tacky. And this is just a tip for fences and decks. If you use like a penetrating oil like Stain and Seal, Expert Stain and Seal oil, it's a penetrating, non-drying oil on a fence. It's just going to keep penetrating into the wood. It's going to self-level. It's not going to leave streaks, runs, drips, marks. It'll just absorb right into the wood. It'll make you look amazing with almost no skill at all. Expert Stain and Seal oil is what it is.
so by me wiping off the excess oil, I'm just preventing that from soaking into the wood further even more.
Correct. It'll continue to absorb into the wood
I can't
and
believe we're
penetrate the wood.
friends. I can't believe you do.
Well, this is great now because I go to the paid store and figure, okay, or the cedar store where I got all my stuff. I'll go, I think I need a gallon for this section. I'll get 3 gallons. And by the
The
time I
thing,
get there, I don't have enough. And like you're saying, I
right.
think I need almost 4 or 5, but at 110, $120 a gallon, I'm like, "Oh boy,
You
it's
watered it
gonna
down, didn't you?
cost." Yeah.
You just watered it down. Yeah, yeah.
But
That
there is a point to where, it's not it's gonna take as much as it's
Mm.
yeah,
gonna
like
take, and
percentage.
that's it. And then you're just wasting it because it's gonna run down. You put on, one good heavy coat, leave it, and that's it. It's gonna absorb in. It just gotta be a good thick heavy coat.
Yeah. So if you
So
don't have an airless sprayer then, and you're doing it by brush, I guess you're just doing nice heavy applications of the stain?
heavy application,
Yeah.
super heavy.
And
Yep.
so
Okay.
I'm coming from like an automotive background where like body work, it's all in the prep. What kind of prep goes into, let's say, if you're painting a fence or if you're painting a deck, like you mentioned? Like this is someone I have know nothing about painting and that any staining. Do you need to do you sand it? Do you like what do you do to prep that? So do you clean it off with like I don't know, some sort of chemical to like take any impurities away? Like what's that process?
The easiest thing to say to begin with is you're only as good as your prep. The fence is only going to look as good as the prep you do on it. Now, I mean, I can't, because there's so many different scenarios, so different.
Oh yeah, yeah.
There's roughs on cedar, there's smooth fence, there's redwood. There's a lot of different types. There's fences where people painted it where they shouldn't paint it. It's got paint on it. There's fences that got semi-transparent stains on it that are great over time. So there's a lot of different um, prepping, on things you got to do, and it all depends on how you want it to look in the end. But the most common is, I mean, you got to pressure wash it. Period. That it has to be pressure washed, and we pressure wash it. If you're watching my videos, it's with a rotating nozzle. It agitates it, cleans it very fast. Pressure wash it really good, and then from there, depending on the type of fence you got, what's actually on there. If you go to Stain and Seal experts website, they have a lot of different products. If you're trying to strip the fence or bleach the fence, there's a lot of different prepping options you can do. But you should, and they got a lot of instructions on how to use those products. So it would be difficult unless I was given, here's a fence,
Oh,
how do you,
okay.
yeah.
But I didn't even know that it's I guess it's kind of the same. I used to work in auto parts, and someone would come in and be like, I need a set of intake manifold gaskets for a small block Chevy. Like, okay, what year is it? Oh, it doesn't matter. Small block Chevy, it's all the same. And then okay, I'll just go pick this up. Like so, I didn't even I didn't even know that there's all these different types of fences and there's different
Yeah,
types of woods. I knew that, but like that there's all these other things to consider, and that's why you're a professional. And
yeah,
that's super cool. And that's why that's why you charge people for your expert
yeah,
skills, right? And
yeah.
and you can't diminish that. That's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, because you don't want to go take an oil-based product, an oil-based stain, semi-transparent stain, and try to stain a fence that's been stained 3 years ago with a water-based
Mm.
polyurethane semi-transparent stain. The oil-base isn't going to soak in, so you're going to have all kinds of problems. So that's why, yeah, professionals will understand that, and so it's not always as simple as it may sound. And so sometimes that's why you need to hire a professional if you want it to look absolutely amazing. But you know you can learn a lot from YouTube. So
Do
there's
you take a
almost,
lot of time to, or does educating your customer take up a lot of your time so that you can just not justify for the sake of justifying, but like justify the costs in their mind so that they know why this is here and these items on that quote are there?
if the customer, a lot of times you just give them a bid and it's too high and they just, do it themselves, or they hire somebody cheaper. If a customer ever, asked me, why it's so high, I will explain to them. And usually after I explain to them, they're like, okay, I totally understand. Like a bid I did for an interior paint job, they got a bid for 4,000. And I said, I can't, compete with that. I gave her a bid for 12,000, and she said why, and I explained why. Mine was 12 and the other painters was 4, and she said, you're hired. just like that. We're talking an $8,000 difference. And she understood like the other guy was not going to do it the way it needed to be done and give her the end result that she wanted. And so she paid me $8,000 more and got what she wanted. So sometimes explaining, if you want the job, explaining, will get you the job.
Hmm. Yeah. So as we wrap up here, Chris, what what advice do you have for somebody that is looking at entering the painting industry?
That'll go back to like one of the things I talked to in the very beginning, and I'll say it in two words: never quit, never give up. So early on in my career, I talked about the first interior job I did. And if you've ever painted anything, with an airless sprayer, you'll go, dude, you're nuts. And no wonder you failed so miserably. I sprayed the trim with a 517 tip. I had no idea. It's the tip that came with the sprayer that I rented, and it was an absolute disaster. But I looked at it and said, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to do this and make this so it looks good. And it took me 4 times. And I could have walked away from the painting trade right then and there and said, I'm not cut out to do this. But I was not going to quit. I was not going to give up. I was going to make this work, and I was going to make painting succeed. I was going to make my company succeed. I wholeheartedly believed that if I didn't give up, if I didn't quit, if I worked hard enough, gave good customer service at a fair price, I would succeed. And I did. And so that's the advice I have for anybody going into the trades, in anybody, especially starting their own business in the trade. You know.
Mhm. So for our listeners, I don't know what's a 517. What comes to mind is, would it be a tip that applies too much product, which gives you runs, or can you explain quickly what a 517 tip and what caused that job to not go well?
So tips are rated by the first number is the fan width at 12 inches from the surface. So a 517 tip is going to give you a 10-inch fan, 12 inches from the surface. The other two numbers is the orifice size. So the larger the number, the largest orifice. What I would spray trim with nowadays is a 310. So it's a little 6-inch fan, and the orifice from a 10 to a 17 is a massive difference. So you're throwing out this wide fan going on this small trim, and you're throwing out a ton of paint. So a ton of overspray, a ton of paint, it's going to cause a lot of runs. And I didn't understand that. I didn't understand what the number on the tip meant and represented. And so it was just so much paint was coming out of the tip. There's no way it could actually hang without running. It was literally impossible. It was
Just so
nobody
much. Yeah.
could do it. So yeah. So I've done multiple videos on tip sizing. I just posted one last week, a brand new one on tip sizing because it's so important.
Yeah,
So
good to know. What are some um, technical skill sets that are good to develop for somebody entering the painting field?
masking and caulking, and you have to start somewhere in painting. Everybody starts with a masking gun in their hand and a caulking gun in their hand. And I'll tell you what, you can, if I need somebody right now to work for me, if you are really good at masking and caulking, I'll pay you 25 bucks an hour right now, all day long. Man, you could be a high school kid in high school making 25 bucks an hour right here in Boise, Idaho. And those two skill sets, you can't go beyond that. I'm not going to teach you anything else until you can mask and caulk. And I've made two courses, online courses that are actually paid courses that go in depth into masking and caulking, and so you can get to that point a lot faster by watching these videos. And there are courses, self-paced courses, where you watch the videos. There's quizzes at the end of each chapter lesson. There's a final exam. You eventually get a certificate from me signed that says you passed the course. Those courses in a weekend, you can watch what I teach you, the proper tools, proper techniques. A lot of stuff I talk about, I don't talk about in my 1700 videos on YouTube. um, that's going to get you making money like really quick. So learn how to mask and caulk, and learn how to cut in a line, man. If you can cut in a straight line, ceiling line in a bedroom like I can, I'll pay you $32 an hour right now, all day long. And you could be, if you could cut in a line like I could cut in a line, and you're a high school kid, you're $30 an hour, man. So that, but that's going to take you. You can learn how to mask and caulk and be really good at it in 1 month. And if you like, if you watch my courses, or you just jump on YouTube and you just really learn and educate yourself, cutting in a straight ceiling line, it just takes miles and miles of cutting in. So,
Well, I always
and I have,
recommend.
I think I got 10 videos on YouTube on how to cut in a straight ceiling line. So
I watched a ton of those, and then the my favorite one was from the when you run a tape line and you do your silicone on the tape,
yeah,
and you can cut into
yeah,
that, pull the tape off, and you've got. I was blown away by that. That was
yeah.
like gold to me. I was like, "This is the best tip ever." And then we'd go paint our wall, and I'd try and cut in
Uh,
and blue paint everywhere, trying to keep your edge line. Oh, so
yeah.
much good information. Last but not least, top three starting out tools for a painter.
So that was because I've thought about that, for a while, and that's not an easy question to answer. But I'll say three things, and then I'll elaborate on it. A sprayer. If you want to make money in this business, you need a sprayer. You need a masker, because you can't ever be a good sprayer without a masker. So it's a hand masker, the M3000 masker. There's no other masker on this planet that is worth buying if you ever see one. The M3000 hand masker is top three greatest inventions in the painting industry ever invented. And then I'll say a good paintbrush. And so you're never going to be able to paint a straight ceiling line or paint good without a good quality paintbrush. And so you're only as good as your brush. And so to elaborate on that, like the sprayer, I eventually created a sprayer starter kit, because if you buy a sprayer, the sprayer doesn't do anything without the tools to spray with it. And so there's some essential tools that you need to go along with that sprayer. So I created a sprayer starter kit that we sell on our online store at Paint Life Supply Co. That's the necessary tools that will make you a fast and effective sprayer when it comes to air and spraying, if you want to make money. A masker isn't any good unless you got tape to go along with it, and some tools to that help you mask. And I eventually created a kit, a masking kit. That is a kit that somebody brand new, if you got to show up to the job site with your own tools, your own masking tools, these are the tools that you need to mask with to be, a fast and efficient masker. And then a paintbrush, um, you know, um, if you only had one paintbrush, you have a 3.5 inch angled sash paintbrush. That's filaments that are cut at an angle. That is the most versatile brush you can buy. If you can only have one, you should probably have a set. But I created what I think is the best paintbrush on the planet, handmade paintbrush by Premier Brushes and Rollers in New York. It's made right in the USA. It's called the Brook, named after my daughter. So my oldest daughter, Brooke. And it comes in a 3 inch, 2.5 inch, and a 2 inch brush, and that's sold in our Paint Life store also, Paint Life Supply Co., which is paintlifesupply.com. And having like, we sell a brush set. So, and it's a kind of like a tool bag. You open it up and it has all the necessary brushes. I said, these are the necessary brushes if you want to be a professional painter. These are the ones you should have, because there's a lot of different things you're going to be doing, brushing, that you probably should have kind of like, a variety of brushes. So those are the three things. If you want to get in the business, of painting, working for somebody, or starting your own business, those are some good things to have.
I love it. Thank you so much. This has been a really fun episode. I've learned a lot. I've had a big perspective shift in failure, and
Yes.
I don't know. I think this episode is going to be very valuable for a lot of people. So, thank you so much for coming on the
Yeah.
show today.
Yeah. It's been awesome. So appreciated you guys contacting me, having me on the show. So yeah. And if anybody wants to find me
Yeah,
and
that was
watch
going to
our
be my next
content,
question. Where can they
yeah.
find you and what do you have going on right now?
YouTube Paint Live TV. I started off on YouTube 12 years ago on the channel. It's called Paint Live TV, over 1,700 videos. We post 2 videos every single week, on YouTube. We post every single day on TikTok, Idaho Painter, Facebook, the Idaho Painter, Instagram, Idaho Painter. We're everywhere. We're on Pinterest. We're on Instagram. We're posting every single day educational content, fun content to teach people how to be a better painter, how to make painting faster, more enjoyable. We do have online courses. From all of this, I started my own retail store, the craziest thing in life. I have a retail store in Boise, Idaho called Paint Life Supply Co. We have an online store that ships worldwide. All the tools you can see and find in my vehicle are sold in my store. We don't sell paint, we sell the tools necessary to make you a fast and efficient painter, at paintlifesupply.com. And the store is owned by me, operated by my family. And when you purchase from us, you're purchasing from, our brand and store, the Idaho Painter and Paint Life Supply Co. And we, love to help and educate people. If you show up in my store, you're going to find me. I'll help you out right in person. If I'm there quite a bit. If you call our store, email our store, chat with our store, you're chatting with me or my family and team. So, yeah,
Love it.
Wow.
cool.
Lots of good resources.
Yeah, tons of good resources.
Yeah.
Chris, thanks again so much for coming on the show. We will put all the links to your social media and all the products. We were jotting them down here as you were saying them, to the links to your website. So if you're interested in getting any of those kits that he talked about or taking any of the courses that Chris talked about, all the links to all that will be in the show notes of this episode. And hopefully people can, take advantage of that and get some standard stuff. I like what you said, how everything that's in your truck is in the store.
Yeah.
No fluff. Hey, I love it.
No, if I wouldn't use it, it's not going to be in our store.
It's awesome.
So,
That's
yeah.
awesome. Well, thank you so much, Chris, for coming on again. We've got to have you back because I could just so many, just your stories and just the knowledge that you have and the way that you. I mean, you say you're not you're an introvert, you're not an extrovert. You could have fooled me. So, thank you so much again for
I'd
coming.
love to be back again. So cool.
Anytime you want to come on. And
All right.
thank you to everyone for listening. We really appreciate it. Once again, you can find all the links in the show notes down below of this episode. Thanks, Hoff.
Thanks, Rosie.
And we'll catch everyone in the next one.